Middle Eastern fragrances are completely taking over the fragrance industry. Let's talk about it. What's going on, guys? My name is Neeb. Welcome back to AROMATIX. It's crazy where we're at in the fragrance industry in literally just, I would say, about a year and a half into me reviewing fragrances. When I initially started, I was talking about designer fragrances, Middle Eastern fragrances, and everything. But as I really started to dive into it, even prior to reviewing fragrances, I had so many Middle Eastern fragrances that were like, they were atrocious. They ranged from atrocious. They really were atrocious, you guys. There were some that literally smelled like alcohol water, like dog water, like straight up, like Snickers, don't eat that. Like that bad, like worse than that. Like, bro, it was crazy. You know what, actually, like there's Snickers accidentally pooped in the basement because it's concrete. And like, if I were to go pick that up, probably would have smelled like some of them. Not gonna lie. Should we do that right now? We need to stay monetized. Anyways, so with Snickers' turd out of the way, they really did smell atrocious, but I was taking the hits and I was going buying them back to back to back. And while buying a lot of those, there were just so many good ones. For example, fragrances like Fragrance World's Exchange Blanc. There were like Black Orchid, Brown Orchard by Fragrance World that was atrocious. There were some Latafa fragrances like back in the day when Raghba was kind of still like hidden. It was like a hidden gem. And then our Moth Craze was a hidden gem. And there were only select few creators that were talking about it, but it hadn't been a wave yet. For example, Jens used to cover Ash, who is, I would say is a friend of mine. He does cover, or he has covered, maybe not as frequent, but he did definitely cover a few of those gems that were there too. A couple of channels, and you know, I would give shout outs if I could remember the channels' names, but they did cover it. And a lot of people that were in France, I would watch people from like Africa and where it was more accessible. And you guys, it's actually crazy because a lot of these brands and fragrances were accessible in other countries where it just wasn't coming to the States because it didn't make marketing sense and a lot of things that we'll go into. And I wanted to illustrate a little bit of those fragrances that are really old, that they were truly hidden gems. I think there was Mohit, if I'm not mistaken. Shout out to Mohit. I think he has his own brand. He's based out in India. I used to watch a lot of his videos. He used to do a lot of Paris Corner and a lot of those other ones. And I used to just blind buy, you guys. I went into debt just blind buying fragrances. Something like Sheikh by Al Haramain has been out for a long time. It's like Drakkar Noir on steroids. And then the whole El Durgham, I remember when this initially came out, nobody even had a clue. And then I got my nose on it. It smells like Alurom Sports. And then Ajmal Shiro, which has been out for quite some time. Even some of my brothers like Shajil, Joy Amin, these are brothers that were talking about a lot of these fragrances. And then even something like Killer Ouds, right? Like this was crazy, bro. Or Midnight Ecstasy. And these were some of the fragrances that I was showcasing in the initial beginning of my channel. But it was also the era where it wasn't really talked about. And it was really confusing to me because they were affordable, they were cheap, but they smelled okay. Like I can understand why it didn't really get that big because I would say about maybe 60% of them were atrocious and you really had to buy through. So for every like $1,000 I'd spend, I would discover like maybe $350 worth that was good. And so it was just haul after haul after haul. And so I understand why initially it was a little bit scary. But since then, you guys, the quality of these have just went through the freaking roof. Let's take Armand, for example. When they initially came out with like Craze Black, or they had some other fragrances that were pretty synthetic. I mean, they were still decent for the price. And to nowadays where you can think of something like Club de Nuit Lionheart, which is phenomenal. It's damn near designer quality. And it also smells like other fragrances that are more expensive for around $130 to $180. Now, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily better, but it's different. It's not even worse either. It might be better for some and worse for some others, but the price is absolutely worth it. Now, what am I getting with the scent profile? Something that's wearable, that's quality is outstanding, that's also longevity is definitely there toe-to-toe with a lot of those designer fragrances, and if not niche. And now you have an even newer realm where fragrance brands are coming out with affordable niche quality. For example, take my collab. Yeah, I'm gonna stunt it. It's all good. Like, we came out with this one. It's around $60. The ingredients, this is factual, is all A-tier oils from some of the same factories that niche oils are used, packaged into $60 with fragrance oils that last the entire day to the next day and even weeks on clothing, like with Carnal Desire. With niche fragrances, obviously, it's not going to be like the most enjoyable one. And there's where you have sometimes some people who will buy something that has a niche DNA. And niche in itself is more specific, it's more polarizing, it's not for everybody and more purposeful style of wearing. And then they come back and say Middle Eastern fragrances suck. Now with those, I think ignorance plays a little bit of role in those cases, or the scent profile in itself you don't enjoy. But if you enjoy those scent profiles, check out those actual fragrances that offer that niche DNA at these affordable prices. For example, Louis Vuitton City of Stars. Who doesn't like City of Stars, right? This is called Marine Blue by Maison de Arabi, and it smells really close to something like that. First thing, the quality. It's right there neck and neck. It's got a lot of these salty accords, also that TR flower. It gives you this sunscreen vibe. It smells like the nighttime on the beach. Louis Vuitton City of Stars. This one does too. And in fact, this one outperforms it, and it goes for around 55 bucks. Now the one thing is though, is that a lot of people will have this stigma of no, they're bad, and maybe they've been burned a couple of times, or they watched the wrong reviews, or they got a bad bottle, and they'll come on on and just have like the stigma of, no, they're bad. But when you find a reviewer that you resonate with, that have given you good recommendations, etc., and I myself have never compromised and I never will. And there are way too many fragrances that just smell really good for me to focus on one or two that don't smell good and say it's good when it's not. I would never even crosses my mind. It's not who I am. But with Marine Blue, this is something that I would personally recommend. The quality of this one, outstanding. Now, it might not have captives, similar captives like that City of Stars, and a captive just basically means a proprietary blend. For example, if they have the note of tiare flower, the way that they create that specific note could be by using 3 different ingredients, and that's their secret recipe. Whereas Maison de Araby might use a tiare flower that's not those 3 ingredients and just as a clear cut. So you'll get subtle nuance differences, and we're not even talking about realms of dupes. Forget the whole stigma of the dupes. We're just talking about fragrance in general. We're talking about the quality in general. The quality of this is up there, you guys. The price of this is down here. It's around $55, and it gives me a very similar experience. I don't have to worry about the bottle. I'm not paying a crazy premium for their marketing and putting it in a celebrity's hand and just saying, here you go, and now they have to charge $450. I'm paying about $55. That gives me similar quality, if not the same quality, and also the same longevity, if not better longevity. Now, that's not always the case. There's always going to be ones that are like fractions and more of twists and etc. And this isn't to take credit away from City of Stars. I think it's a great fragrance. Would I buy it again? Yes, absolutely. But we have to recognize that most of the population can't. And you also have to recognize that their marketing, it's not intended for everybody to be able to buy those either. And so with that being said, before you start going, keyboard happy, consider the following, that it's not intended to be for everybody. While I know some of you guys might be out there and willing to or able to spend that money on it, you do you. Keep doing it. I'm doing it too. I'm buying it, and I would buy it again. But this isn't to take credit from that fragrance. But what it is to say is to explain the rise of the fragrance. Why is it rising? So I'm just giving you the facts. And the fact is that they're giving you better quality. Now, I've been in multiple factories firsthand where I've seen how these processes go. I've dealt with the interactions and the way that these creations are made. I've dealt with exchanges and formulations and etc. and seen factually how close and the sources of where they come from. And you'd be surprised to see the sources relatively, well, extremely close, except for when they are using captives, proprietary blends. And that's the best way that brands nowadays can keep their fragrance very specific to them. And I think that that's great. I think that that actually gives you a certain level of quality that only that brand can give you. Now, what this means for designer brands is that they have to work a little bit harder. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that it'll give us a better quality. And it just kind of checks the market in a sense of giving us a certain level of quality with the expectation of a higher price tag. And that should be the case, no? So with that being said, something like JPG Le Male Elixir is a prime example. Now, with Le Male Elixir and JPG fragrances, they give us a captive for their tonka bean. And that means that their perfumers worked a little bit harder to really create something special for JPG. Now, no matter what dupe is created or inspired by, with something like this, you truly can never capture it exactly because they call it a captive. And that captive is their protection towards that note of tonka bean. So it doesn't matter what dupe or inspo you try to make or create, you'll never truly get that. And similar story with Louis Vuitton. With Louis Vuitton, they have cask cologne, and their perfumers and stuff work a little bit harder to give us a proprietary blend or what's called a captive. Now, yeah, they can get clothes, they can do all that stuff, and we're not gonna negotiate here whether or not it's right or wrong or whatever it is, because there are many factors to that, right? There's the price point. Then we would discuss, is it right or wrong that they're charging $450? Is it right or wrong that they're taking a scent profile and making it more affordable? So there's too many sides of the spectrum here, and that's not what I'm talking about or focusing on. I'm not standing on either side, but I'm rather making sense of why it's exploding. So it's fantastic. And that's simply that. You're getting very similar quality, not always the same quality because of those captives, like I mentioned, but damn near. And like I said, I have pretty extensive history and experience in this whole thing. And if you want to know a little bit more in depth on this topic, I will be going more in depth on the AROMATIX Show, my podcast series, where I'll talk more details and get really into the nitty and gritty on all this. But for the purpose of today's video, we just wanted to talk about why it's rising as well. So with all that being said, it absolutely makes sense. Last thing is that I will say that when I first started my channel, a lot of it was Middle Eastern fragrances. I would say it was like 90% Middle Eastern fragrances. And it was because I was on a mission as someone who's from the Middle East to bring a little bit more of the heritage back into the community. There is a lot that was lost throughout the years and from Middle Eastern perfumery. And I was on a mission to really bring it back and show people fragrances that weren't talked about because there were no financial gains, right? Like in order to see things, they have to be marketed and people have to put money in it. And so not many channels were talking about it because it didn't make financial sense. This is isn't a dig at any channel, and if anything, I gave props to a lot of channels that have, and will continue to. Like Cuba also has talked about these cheapies plenty of time. And if I missed over a name, it doesn't mean that they didn't, but rather I just missed over the name. It's literally as simple as that, you guys. But most channels, and it makes sense, right? Like in order for us to be able to produce, etc., that's a whole nother topic. There has to be some kind of gain. Imagine if I were to spend about $4,000 a month on fragrance, which I have done actually, and I went into like a crazy amount of debt. And I buy all these Middle Eastern fragrances, and there is absolutely no return except for YouTube gains, which, believe it or not, is really not that much. Now, I'd be in the hole, and I was in the hole for like a good year, but I trusted in it, and I worked behind the scene with a lot of distributors, a lot of factories, a lot of these owners to make it more accessible and available in the West, and for it to make sense for it to be as mainstream as it is mainstream today, even without me having that financial gain. So I was doing this with or without it being paid, and I continue to do it with or without it being paid, and because of the fact that I'm on ultimately a mission for the legacy of Middle Eastern fragrances to get that recognition. It all started in the Middle East, you guys. That stigma and oftentimes, unfortunately, racism of Middle East and the way that it smells, and, you know, the misconception that India and Middle East are the same, and Asia, it's crazy, man. Anyway, in fact, it started as early as the 10th century when Queen of Sheba, also known as Bilqis, ruled the region of Yemen, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and they had some kind of clash with King Solomon, and then as a peace offering, she offered them myrrh, an actual note of myrrh. And Yemen in the Middle East has always been rich in a lot of ingredients, including saffron, myrrh, honey, even fruits like grapes, and it was very fragrant in general, and even from early days. Olibanum, frankincense, all of these ingredients initially started in the Middle East, including the first forms of perfumery. There's a brand called Reine de Seba, and the creator of this brand is calling his brand as Seba because of the fact that it was Sheba. Sheba in Arabic is Seba. And so Seba and this brand really focuses on the heritage of where perfumery started in the Middle East. So this is just a little backstory as to why I personally wanted this Middle Eastern wave, and I was one of the biggest, if not the biggest voice behind the Middle Eastern wave, is because it all started in Yemen. And I am from Yemen. If you want a little bit more information, Reine de Seba, the brand themselves, this is not a promotional video, I promise. You can go check out their website, and they have a book. And this book is a little bit of a documentary talking about the perfumery origins, etc. And it's unfortunately been kind of taken over into the West, and a lot of misconceptions and misconstrues of Middle Eastern fragrance. Now, the difference between quality, low quality, and high quality is different, but Middle Eastern fragrance has been blanketed by this clone wave or dupe wave. That's in fact not the case. And I have many Middle Eastern fragrances, like from this brand right here called Oud Elite. I've also got Oman Luxury. There's even this brand called Kajal and Arabian Oud. This is only a fraction of some of the brands from the Middle East that do niche, that you see every day, that you don't even realize are Middle Eastern niche. Amouage, for God's sake, is Middle Eastern niche. So yes, perfumery started in the Middle East, and I'm really driven and motivated to bring that heritage back. And clearly I've been pretty successful, more so successful with the cheaper Middle Eastern waves. However, over time, I have started to really envelop myself in a lot more designer, mainstream, even in the West and in the East. So I talk about all of them. Middle Eastern niche, Middle Eastern designer. Well, there isn't Middle East, it's just Middle Eastern niche. Designer fragrances, Western fragrances. I grew up smelling YSLY. It was my signature scent, Salvatore Ferragamo Uomo. It's not like I'm wearing Barnyard Oud and just like spicy and whatever. No. But I will say that I've been on this mission for a long time, more than just what you guys see on the surface, to bring Middle Eastern fragrances into light, not just the cheapies in general. So the first year of me working, I established my relationship and partnership and the affiliation with Triple Traders, Oud Store, and we've been really grinding and conversations with some of these brand owners and talking about how we can implement better ways and better quality. You've got to do better, you got to do this. And over time, they've really been implementing this with new technologies. I mean, you see some of these brands and what they were producing a year ago and now what they're producing, and it's night and day. Some of their technologies, including centrifuging, freezing, centrifuging, and freezing at the same time, creating their own captives. You guys, it's mind-blowing. And the difference is the fact that they're doing it at affordable costs. And the crazy thing is that some of these brands, including Swiss Arabian, make fragrances for a lot of other niche brands. So there's a misconception that I'm going to continue to work on to clear up, but this Middle Eastern wave absolutely makes sense. And even when it comes to Middle Eastern niche, when you look at fragrances like these, you can find these for less than $200. Super high quality, long lasting. There is a scent profile for everyone. Not everything is oud, and even when there's oud, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna smell bad. This smells like fabric softener with a little spice. This has absolutely no spice. It's pineapple and white florals. It's unisex. It's amazing. So you just have to really pay attention to the descriptors, leave those stigmas out of your mind, and actually find the reviewer that resonates and explains the fragrances accurately. And that's pretty much it. Another beautiful Middle Eastern fragrance is this, Belfiore. It's all about apricot, a little bit of this earthy undertone. It's fuzzy like suede. It's It's very nice, but it also has like leathery undertone. So a lot of these fragrances, you believe it or not, you guys, are inspired by Middle East. Something like Myrrh Mystery by Tom Ford is all about myrrh, which is one of the first fragrance notes that was used in Yemen. Something like Amber Saffron, that's all about the saffron, which originated in Iran. And then also when you're talking about something like Oud for Greatness, that's oud and saffron. When you talk about something like Baccarat Rouge 540, you guys, this is amberwoods and saffron 100% to the max. It's all Middle Eastern. It really truly is all Middle Eastern, and these are all just the facts. I invite you guys to check out the AROMATIX show for the podcast, where we'll dive deeper into all of this, and also my involvement, which was very significant, and we'll talk a little bit more so into some of those conversations that I had early on in my first year into really making a difference in this wave, even when it didn't make financial sense, because for me, this was never about just talking about dupes or trying to make a buck or two. This was always and will always be about a legacy, bringing the heritage back, bringing some true knowledge while you guys can enjoy it, and making a difference. Not charging 400 freaking bucks for, perfumery. And even when it is like niche, talking about the ones that don't charge 400, 500 bucks, unless it's absolutely worth it. Some Amouage fragrances retail for like $400, but guess what? They use high quality ingredients like oud. It's not that cheap. It's not cheap, period. They might use 2%, 3%. And there's still obviously going to be fragrances in our realm and in every realm that just are crazy priced. But even then, where we are today with Middle Eastern fragrances makes 100% sense, and very specifically to the affordable ones. But the Middle Eastern fragrance wave is not going to just stop at the affordable ones. And I think that this was just a great door opening, which is helping with that stigma. Unfortunately, it's not going to erase racism. The world is the world. It is what it is. But we respond to this with kindness and showing that, it's fragrance, bro. Like, relax. Relax, it's fragrance. And also the fact that all fragrance from the Middle East don't smell like oud. Like, they smell good. Like, so even the amberwoods and the divana and sage tea, divana, maramia, like cardamom. This is something that's so deeply rooted in my heritage and in my backbone DNA. So with all that being said, I played a huge role into this, and I'm very happy and proud to see where the Middle Eastern fragrance community is at this time, and the fact that it's about 80% of the fragrance community nowadays. I'm also very appreciative and acknowledging of the fact that there were always people who were talking of these, maybe not as in depth or as heavily as I did, obviously, because God might have given me different opportunities to be able to afford. Actually, honestly, I just went in debt. I went into like $40,000 of debt, you guys, like for this. That's how committed I am though. And ultimately, I love this shit and I bleed this shit. Very committed to bringing you guys the facts, to bringing you guys value. And you can see that in my products as well with AROMATIX and French Avenue, which is a commitment to and a testament to the future releases and launches that are coming soon. Niche quality juices at affordable costs. We're working on some more Western mainstream fresher fragrances. The first two that we started off with might be considered something a bit more oriental, but still very sexy. Royal Taboo is one that's very easy to wear. It's tobacco, cinnamon, cardamom, very naturalistic take on fragrances. All of the fragrances you'll notice in consistency will have a naturalistic approach. Even the cinnamon we used in this one was more so to resemble actual cinnamon bark. And so it's like this baking cinnamon. And then there's also a pretty decent dose of cashmere, vanilla, and tobacco, a naturalistic tobacco. Carnal Desire is this jammy raspberry, pretty hefty dose of leather and incense. It's very intense. There's also rose and cotton candy. This is for those of you who like incense, who like bakhur, and like this very intense punch of fruit, basically. Not that sweet, but also having some of that very naturalistic cinnamon, the baking style of cinnamon for $59, and a lot more releases coming soon. This is my brand in collaboration with Fragrance World to bring you guys more affordable fragrances because of the fact that I couldn't have made it cheaper without them. They have certain connections in the industry, and if you want to know all these connections and what it means and the costs and all that stuff that goes behind this, including the marketing and all that good stuff, you guys, I highly recommend and invite you guys to check out the AROMATIX show, which will be dropping videos, I would say, about once every week to week and a half. So that's pretty much it, you guys. Check these out. They're available on Joma Shop. Also, if you want to know all of those affiliates and websites where we do get a lot of these Middle Eastern fragrances, check out this screen for a bunch of coupon codes. Joma Shop also offers in-application coupons where you can save cash on already low prices. They sell niche, they sell designers. I would never buy retail again unless it's brand new, which at that point I actually have to. And even when brands like Xerjoff and Kilian releases something new, I just buy it directly off of their website. But you don't have to. You can just come here, catch that review or first impression, and then then make your decision moving from there. Honesty, integrity, and morality always been my top priority. It might have been a little bit awkward with my growth and you know what you guys, I started doing these on like my bed, you guys, talking about Middle Eastern fragrances, and like I was like this, it's just crazy, man. And now look at where we are today. And I wouldn't change a thing. Ultimately bringing you guys objective value, reality, and the truth, and it'll always be that way. So yeah, the rise of Middle Eastern fragrances 100% makes sense. You tell me, $55 or $500? The answer is yours. I'll do them both. I honestly would do them both. I have to do them both, right? I'm committed. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comment section which fragrance really changed your mind. And if you're one of those people who probably got a bad experience in the past, I invite you to try a fragrance again. Find a fragrance that you actually enjoy the scent profile. Don't go testing new fragrance DNA by buying one of these Middle Eastern fragrances and be like, oh my God, this sucks, and attributing it to the fact that it's Middle Eastern. No, find a fragrance that you already love, you know you love, maybe YSL Y80P, and grab its maybe twist or inspo or dupe. Not all of them are dupe, but grab something similar. And that's pretty much it for today's video. My name is Neve. Thank you for tuning back in AROMATIX, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.